In 1637, a single tulip bulb cost more than a house in Amsterdam. Then one morning it didn't. Here's the actual story and why it keeps happening. Imagine you're on a playground. Everyone is playing with standard gray rocks. They are okay, but they are a little boring. Then one day a kid walks in with a rock that isn't gray. It shines bright red, deep blue, and neon green. It looks like a tiny piece of magic. What happens next? Suddenly nobody wants the gray rocks anymore. Every single kid on that playground wants the shiny rock. If you have one, you are the coolest kid in school. If you don't, you will do anything to get your hands on one. That is exactly what happened in a country called the Netherlands about 400 years ago. Except they didn't use shiny rocks. They used a flower called a tulip. Back then, the Netherlands was one of the richest places in the entire world. Their capital city, Amsterdam, was filled with grand houses, bustling ships, and people who suddenly had a lot of extra money. But they had a problem. They wanted a way to show everyone else how rich they were. Enter the tulip. Tulips didn't originally grow in Europe. They came from far away, from a place called Turkey. When they first arrived in the Netherlands, people had never seen anything like them. The colors were incredibly bright and intense. Owning a tulip became the ultimate flex. It was like owning the newest, coolest smartphone or the rarest pair of sneakers today. If you had a tulip garden, it meant you were a VIP. But soon, the story got a whole lot stranger. Because these weren't just ordinary flowers. They were a special kind of flower that turned people completely baby-brained with greed. Here's the first hidden secret of the tulip bubble. The most beautiful, most expensive tulips were actually sick. Normal tulips are just one solid color, like plain red or plain yellow. But every once in a while, a tulip would grow with beautiful, crazy stripes that looked like flames melting down the petals. One famous flower, called the Semper Augustus, had brilliant white petals with deep red streaks running through them. It looked like someone had dipped a paintbrush in cherry syrup and swirled it through milk. People went absolutely wild for these striped flowers. They thought it was a magical miracle. But it wasn't magic. It was a virus. A tiny bug called an aphid was biting the plants and giving them a sickness called the tulip-breaking virus. This virus didn't kill the flower right away, but it messed with the plant's genes, breaking up the solid color and creating those gorgeous, fiery patterns. Because it was a sickness, nobody could predict when it would happen. You couldn't just plant a seed and guarantee a striped flower. It was like a lottery. If you planted 100 normal bulbs, you might get lucky and have one turn into a magnificent striped monster flower worth a fortune. This meant that tulips weren't just pretty decorations anymore. They were treasure chests waiting to be opened. Every regular person looked at their garden and thought, if my flower gets the lucky sickness, I will be rich forever. As more and more people wanted to buy tulips, the prices started going up. At first, it was just rich people buying them from other rich people. But then prices started climbing faster and faster. Every single week, a bulb was worth more than it was the week before. Normal working people noticed this. The shoemaker, the baker, the farmer, and the weaver all looked at each other and said, why am I working all day making shoes when I could just buy a tulip bulb, wait a month, sell it, and make a whole year's worth of money? So everyone stopped doing their regular jobs and started trading tulips. But this created a huge mechanical problem. Tulips only bloom in the spring, during April and May. Once the flower dies, you dig up the bulb in the summer, and that is the only time you can physically move it from one garden to another. The rest of the year, through the autumn and the freezing winter, the bulb is buried deep in the dirt, growing its roots. You can't see it, you can't touch it, and you certainly can't hand it to someone else. How do you buy and sell a flower that is trapped underground in frozen mud? The Dutch traders came up with a brilliant, dangerous solution. They invented what they called the wind trade. We call it the futures market. Instead of trading actual physical tulip bulbs, people started trading pieces of paper. Imagine you come to me in December. You want to buy my rare tulip bulb, but it's buried under ice. I write on a piece of paper, I promise to give you this specific bulb in May. You give me your money and I give you the paper. Now, you own the paper. But 3 weeks later, the price of tulips goes up even more. You don't want to wait until May to get the flower. You take that same piece of paper and sell it to a baker for double what you paid me. The baker turns around and sells the paper to a blacksmith for even more. That single piece of paper might be sold 10 times in 1 month. The flower was still sitting completely still, sleeping in the dark, freezing dirt, while its paper ghost was flying around the taverns of Amsterdam, making people rich on paper. People were buying and selling things that didn't physically exist yet. They were trading promises. By the winter of 1636, the whole country had lost its mind. The prices didn't just go up, they shot up like a rocket ship into outer space. To understand how crazy it got, let's look at the prices of that single, beautiful, sick flower. the Semper Augustus. At the very peak of the madness, one single bulb of this flower was sold for 5,500 guilders. That is an old word for their money, but let's translate what you could buy with that same amount of cash back then. With the money from one single bulb, you could buy 4 fat oxen, 8 fat pigs, 12 fat sheep, 4 loads of rye wheat, 8 loads of barley, 2 hogsheads of wine, 4 barrels of beer, 2 tons of butter, 1,000 pounds of cheese, a complete bed with luxury pillows, a suit of fine clothes, and a silver drinking cup. And after buying all of that food and gear, you would still have money left over. Another trader traded an entire flourishing business, a fully functioning beer brewery, just to get his hands on one single bulb. People were trading their life savings, their houses, their horses, and their family land just for pieces of paper promising a flower. Every night, people would gather in the back rooms of local bars and taverns. They called these rooms colleges. They would drink beer, laugh, and bid on tulip papers. Everyone was smiling because everyone was winning. If you bought a bulb for $100 today, it was worth $200 tomorrow. It felt like free money. It felt like the party would never end. But bubbles always pop, and they pop for a very simple reason. Eventually, you run out of kids on the playground who are willing to buy the shiny rock. The crash happened on a cold Tuesday morning in February 1637 in the city of Haarlem. A group of traders gathered in their usual tavern. A man stood up and offered to sell a package of everyday tulip bulbs for a very high price. He expected everyone to raise their hands and shout out higher bids, just like they did the night before. But nobody raised their hand. The room stayed completely silent. The man looked around, a bit nervous. He lowered the price a little bit. "Okay, how about this much?" Still, nobody moved. The traders looked at the floor. They looked at their beers. Suddenly, a cold prickle of fear went through the room. The traders started thinking, wait a minute, why am I paying the price of a house for a root that grows in the mud? What if I can't find anyone else to buy this from me tomorrow? Within 3 minutes, the magic spell was totally broken. The fear spread from that one tavern to the next tavern, then down the street, and then across the entire country like a wildfire. By that afternoon, everyone was trying to sell their tulip papers, but nobody was buying. Imagine you are holding a piece of paper that you paid $5,000 for yesterday. You try to sell it for $4,000. No one wants it. You offer it for $1,000. Silence. You offer it for $100. Still, nobody wants it. In a single week, those magical, priceless tulip bulbs turned right back into what they always were, just regular old vegetables. Now, if you read most history books or listen to people talking on the internet today, this is where they end the story. They tell you that the entire Dutch economy crashed, that thousands of people lost everything and jumped into the canals, and that the country was ruined forever. But here's the absolute weirdest part of the entire story. That didn't happen. It's mostly a myth. Modern historians dug up the old court records from 1637 to see who actually went broke, and they found that almost nobody did. The country didn't collapse. Amsterdam stayed incredibly rich. How is that possible? Remember the wind trade? Remember how people were just trading pieces of paper in back rooms and taverns? When the bubble popped, almost nobody had actually paid the crazy prices yet. The baker had promised to pay the blacksmith in May when the bulb came out of the ground. But since February came first and the prices crashed, the baker just went to the blacksmith and said, "Hey, remember that promise? Yeah, I'm not doing that." The whole thing was built on promises, so when it crashed, people just broke their promises. The government stepped in and said, "Look, everyone just pay 3.5% of what you promised and we will call it even." The only people who truly lost money were the super rich collectors who had actually handed over real gold coins for physical flowers before the madness started. The regular folks who were shouting in taverns just went right back to making shoes, baking bread, and weaving blankets. They were a little embarrassed, but they weren't ruined. The stories about the entire country going bankrupt were actually written later by grumpy church leaders and writers from other countries. They wanted to write scary moral fables to warn people against being greedy, so they made the story sound way worse than it actually was. So, why do we still talk about Tulipmania 400 years later? We talk about it because human brains haven't changed at all. The tulip bubble wasn't a story about flowers. It was a story about how humans behave when we get together in groups. Every few years, the world invents a new tulip. In the 1990s, it was Beanie Babies. People genuinely believed that little stuffed bears filled with plastic pellets were going to pay for their kids' college education. They paid thousands of dollars for a specific tag. Today, those same toys sit in cardboard boxes in attics, worth almost nothing. A few years later, it was the early internet. People bought up any website ending in .com for millions of dollars, even if the company didn't make any money at all, just because they were scared of missing out. More recently, we saw it with Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and digital art pictures called NFTs. People paid millions for a digital receipt of a cartoon monkey, believing the price would go up forever. The pattern is always exactly the same, step by step. First comes the spark, where something new, rare, and exciting appears. It's cool, and people genuinely like it. Next is the greed, where the price starts going up and people notice that other people are getting rich without doing any hard work. Then comes the FOMO, the fear of missing out, where people get terrified that everyone else is getting rich while they are left behind. They stop thinking clearly and buy in, even if the price makes no sense. This triggers the paper chase, where people stop caring about the actual item and only care about flipping it to someone else for more money. Eventually, the silence hits. One day, someone looks around and asks, "Wait, why is this worth so much?" The room goes quiet. Finally, the pop happens and everyone runs for the exit at the exact same time. The big lesson of the tulip bubble is this: when everyone around you is shouting that something is the new way to get rich quick, take a deep breath. Walk out of the tavern. Because history shows that no matter how pretty, shiny, or magical the rock looks today, by tomorrow morning it usually turns right back into mud.